Alright, what's up amigos? Season 2 is officially 1 week away, and the Diablo team just had their second dev stream today, going over unique changes, class balance changes, and more. And as I said in my previous video, I still think this is a huge step in the right direction, and just the beginning of Diablo 4's revival. If you haven't already, go check out my last video. Now this video is specifically to talk about rogues, and the buffs us rogue players received today. Even though they said that we didn't need it and we were in a good spot, they absolutely put us in a better spot than before, which I don't really think they realize these things sometimes when pushing these updates, which goes to show I think we really need private testing from community members, I think. But anyways, I'm not going to go into detail about the bucket changes, the resistance changes. We'll go over that in a different video. What everyone needs to know is that the game is changing entirely again. The devs have updated a lot of uniques, removing worthless affixes, replacing them with more desirable affixes instead. They've reworked some Paragon nodes and skills, and yeah. So starting off with the uniques, we have things like the Condemnation Dagger, where crit strike chance against injured enemies affix was replaced with critical strike damage. I personally, if you've been following the channel and following my rogue build guides, you know that I love this unique. I thought this unique has been great since day one, and this makes it even better. So instead of it being a situational thing where you can only have that crit strike chance against injured enemies, which would be 35% or less HP, this is now replaced with a flat crit strike damage. Again, we're not going to go over the bucket changes. I'll leave the patch notes in the description down below so you can see what they're changing. It is pretty interesting. It is pretty significant. You then have things like Cowl of the Nameless, where max energy affix replaced with bonus ranks of imbuement skills, and then dexterity affix replaced with damage reduction from close enemies. Some may think this is a downside. I think it's actually a huge benefit to us because you always want that damage reduction, the defensive layering on your armor instead of just dexterity. We can get damage elsewhere. You also have things like Eyes in the Dark, where damage to enemies affected by trap skills increased by 150%. You have damage to elite enemies affix replaced with maximum life, which is again defensive layering. Dodge chance affix replaced with flat damage reduction. This is much better than dodge chance just to have the flat damage reduction. And even the unique power of Eyes in the Dark got buffed. The unique power now additionally increases the damage of death trap by 30 to 50%. This is going to be great for those who enjoy Trapper Rogue. Here's another cool one, Word of Akan. The ultimate skill damage affix has been increased by 200%. The cooldown reduction affix replaced with Rain of Arrows, specific Rain of Arrows cooldown reduction at 300% of normal value. And the crit strike damage with imbued skills has actually been replaced with movement speed. And I think this is one of the biggest gripes that people had with this amulet. This amulet absolutely has potential. It replacing the global cooldown reduction is going to be okay if the value is good. We don't know, like on paper as it reads here, it seems like it'll be good, but only time will tell. And then of course the crit damage with imbued skills, since they're reworking the crit damage bucket, this is why they're leaning more towards, you know, secondary things and more of like resource rolls and just utility like movement speed, which I'm okay with. Now let's go over the skill changes. Now, the devs, yet again, are wanting us to use something other than puncture. They have went over again how, you know, other basic skills just aren't being used. And I don't mean to be disrespectful at all when I say this, but I don't think they really understand why we use puncture. Aside from our exploit glyph, puncture is a cone frontal attack that can inflict vulnerability status on multiple targets indefinitely. In order to balance this, they would have to add a cooldown in between, and what I mean by that is instead of being able to indefinitely apply vulnerable status, they should add it to where we can only apply vuln to a second target. And what I mean by this is instead of being able to indefinitely apply vuln status, they should add it to where we can apply a vuln status to a target once every so and so seconds, exactly how exploit glyph works. Until they do this, or something like this, sadly, Blade Shift, Heartseeker, Forceful Arrow simply won't be used, and that is just the sad reality. Puncture is easily accessible. It's a better skill overall. It has a great animation. It doesn't take too long. It's not clunky. You can use it on the move. I mean, there's so many different things on why we use it, but what I just explained is the main reason why you use Puncture over the other basic attacks. Now, countering Dark Shroud. This is actually a huge buff. Instead of needing 4 active Shroud stacks to gain the extra 9% crit strike chance, we would only need 2 active shadows now, which is very easy to manage. Between Umbrus and between just if you run Dark Shroud in your kit in general, 2 Shrouds is very, very, again, manageable. The Caltrip duration has been increased and Enhanced Smoke Grenade. Enhanced Smoke Grenade, yes, you are reading this correctly. Enhanced Smoke Grenade damage has been increased from 20 to 25%. This is a multiplicative damage change, by the way, to a build that has already been established to destroy everything. Grenade builds are going to go crazy in Season 2, so, and you'll see why, because there's more. Passives. Impetus. Distance for damage buff reduced from 15 to 12 meters. Now increases the damage of your next non-basic attack. Victimize Keystone passive. Victimizes damage is increased by 120% of your damage versus vulnerable bonus. So whatever your maximum damage versus vulnerable, whether it's 200%, whatever, you're getting 120% of that. Now we have Close Quarters Combat. This is definitely the most used Keystone passive of rogues, and it got changed. And the change is actually pretty significant. So, the damage calculation you can see here has been updated. Now, previously, damaging a close enemy with Marksman or Cutthroat skills each granted 10%, which is additive. It's 10% plus attack speed bonus for 8 seconds. While you have both attack speed bonuses active, so when you hit a target with both a Cutthroat and a Marksman, you would originally deal 30% X increased damage against crowd-controlled enemies. Well, on paper, as this reads, that is not the case anymore. The enemy does not have to be crowd-controlled. Now, damaging a close enemy with Marksman or Cutthroat skills each grant a 10% additive attack speed bonus for 8 seconds. While both bonuses are active, your damage dealt is increased by 40% X of the total amount of your damage versus crowd control bonus. It does not state that the target has to be crowd controlled. So what this means is this is huge for bosses. This is huge for unbreakables. I mean, this right here is a massive, massive buff, especially when they're just releasing their second Uber boss, Duriel. And again, bosses cannot be CC'd unless you stagger them. So this is going to be a constant damage buff because especially if you're running blades. If you're running Twisting Blades, you run Puncture. Puncture counts as a marksman spell. Then you have Blades, Cutthroat. You'll always have this bonus up. Now let's go over the Paragon nodes. Eldritch Bounty Legendary Node. Now previously this was just a worthless node that nobody used, and this is why. Half of the node was irrelevant because it granted you resistances which were broken. Now, when you attack with an imbued skill, you gain 3% maximum resistances. So, since we're not going over resistances just like the buckets in this video, let me give you the TLDR real quick. If you've played other ARPGs with resistances, they now work as they should. There's a cap, a max increase through items, skills, etc., reductions from higher world tiers. All resistance affixes are available on gear. So, Eldritch grants 3% max resistance when we attack with an imbued skill. So Frost gives us 3% max cold, Poison 3% max poison, and Shadow obviously 3% max shadow. The max resistances are 70%. Total over cap possibilities are 85%. When we use our imbuements with Eldritch Bounty allocated, we would go up to 73% max over capped resistances. And then the other half stayed the same. So on top of the max resistances that we gain, we get the 20% increased damage for that imbuement element for 9 seconds as well. All in all, Eldritch Bounty is definitely worth taking. We have a Pride Rare Glyph change. Previously, Paragon nodes within range gained 40% bonus to their physical damage and damage reduction modifiers. Now it's just 125% bonus to all rare nodes within range. And we also have a change to No Witnesses legendary node as well. No Witnesses node was another one that was never really taken. Originally, your ultimate skills deal 30% X increased damage and grant you 10% X increased damage for 20 seconds when cast. Now, your ultimate skills gain an additional 10% X damage from your damage with ultimates, with your damage with ultimate bonus, and grant this bonus to all skills for 8 seconds when cast. So they took this already very niche node and made it more questionable for sure, but I'm curious to see if we can finally make a Rain of Arrows build become top tier, especially with the changes to Word of a Khan and the changes to the Dark Shroud. So this is definitely interesting to see, and I'm curious to see how the community works around it. So now to finish off the balance changes here, we have legendary aspect balance changes. Now let's go over quickly of the absolutely questionable changes that they've made here. So, first and foremost, I'm sure you can see, Icy Alchemist and Toxic Alchemist aspects have both been increased, the damage. If you are familiar with the Alchemist aspects and just the explosions, they have already scaled in a weird way. So these being buffed, again, very, very questionable because these are pretty significant buffs as well. I mean, from the low end to the high end. Other than that, we have Volatile Shadows. The damage was increased there. We have Bursting Venoms, which was fixed in Season 1, but now it doesn't require a crit strike to actually proc. The lucky hit chance was increased from 10 to 15%, and the toxic pool damage increase isn't really significant at all. That damage has always been minor. Then we have Energize and Aspect. When we hit an elite enemy with a basic skill, we grant 2 min-max low to high end energy. And then the Synergy is just agility skill damage increase from 10 to 30 to 30 to 50. So yeah, overall, I mean, Rogue snuck by with all these changes, and I don't think that, again, I don't think the devs quite understand how crazy these changes are. And I say this out of the most respect possible. But rogues are definitely, even with the new damage buckets, we'll still be S tier. I honestly think we'll even be S plus now, for sure. Builds like Poison Blade, Shadow Blades are still going to smack every bit of content in the game. Trapper Rogues got a huge buff. Rain of Arrows may actually be a useful and viable build now. Grenade Rogues are going to go absolutely crazy with the new changes. Both smoke grenade damage, the buffs to Alchemist. I mean, all in all, if you haven't decided what to roll, if you're wondering if Rogue is a safe roll for you in Season 2, the answer is yes. Absolutely a safe choice. Yes, Rogues will clear all content easily, as they always have been able to. Will we still be squishy? Yes. There is no change in that because we didn't really get a single survivability balance change. This was all targeted towards damage. The best advice I can give you for survivability is one of which they've already advised. Pay attention to the extra defensive layering, which is now resistances, because they will finally work. I'll be working on the rogue guides over the next few weeks, amigos. Until then, smash that like button, comment down below what you think about the changes end of Season 2, subscribe if you haven't yet and you want some quality Diablo 4 content, and until next time, take care.